So I picked this corner here because it has examples of 3 of the 4 different types of medium, and or media, I should say. And this is the other blue painting that is sort of, it's not a companion, but it has a lot of similarities. And it's even sort of laid out, interestingly, along similar lines. And this is the one I left my cheat sheet. It's something banana?
It's coconut palm.
Coconut palm.
Yeah.
So this does have a palm feel about it.
Yeah.
And so what's the basis of this one, just out of curiosity?
So, you know, for like El Salvador is a tropical country, and my family, we had a place near the beach, and you know, there's coconut palms everywhere. And so this is the bluest painting in the series because it's supposed to like resemble water, and even with the marbleizing, it's, you know, this wish-wash kind of feel to it. And yeah, I think for me, it, like when I think of my childhood in El Salvador, I think the beaches and the jungle and the animals and you know, all these like strange alien-looking plants and trees, and so I you know, try to do a tribute to my experience at the beach, and you know, all sorts of weird fishes would wash up ashore. So in, you know, in the childhood mind, it was quite an interesting experience to experience so much color and nature.
Right. No, it definitely comes across, as well as this one's a good example of lots and lots of different textures and painting methods. So this one's very crackled and really very impasto. This is this just modeled, or is there another element in there?
That's marble. It's like marbleizing, so it has like extenders and like oily mediums to it, and then
yeah, because you can see a lot of almost
there's like maybe
pearlescence going on,
like
and,
4 or 5 colors.
Yeah, it shimmers, and
Yeah.
it's kind of like when you look at it different ways, you get the light hitting it, it reads differently. And then this is just very thick up here. But is this just paint, or is this anything added to it, the red?
I think it's modeling paste.
Okay, well, that would explain it.
But it was painted on with a this tool I made with like it's just like a brush, but instead of bristle hairs, it has like needles.
Yeah, it's like a rake.
It looks like a rake. It's a rake, pretty much. Yeah.
And then the blue here is really great on both sides here. It looks like water. I mean, it's very mottled. And is that just all from painting? Yeah.
So that's you know, during the summer, I was teaching myself how to marbleize.
Okay, so this is, there's a lot of layers of color in here.
And so I bought a blowtorch, and I bought certain tools that I needed to do, and so, you know, this blue took about 3 days to dry, to completely dry, because I had to add all sorts of mediums for it to like extend the color and the fluidity.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious, were you able to zoom in on it? Okay. Because when you zoom back, then the point I want to make to people is this is a good example. There's so much rich texture, but yet your initial look at this when you're standing, you know, from back here is the shapes, the forms, and the overall composition. And then it's as you get up here, you realize all of the modeling, you know, like this right here with this into this other blue. It's like a shore looking back at something, or maybe, you know, up at the sky. But it's just all these different textures and painting methodologies, which is really interesting because it's not what you usually think of with people with hard edge and geometric. So I'm really excited about the way your taking what is sort of you have a passion about, obviously, which is geometry. You like structure and balance and things like that. But what you're doing is you're mixing it up. You're bringing in curvilinear elements, and the fact that you're using each one of these elements, structural elements, as a painting opportunity to imbue. I don't want to say content, but it is in a way. What you're trying to do is picture. Actually, it's not imbuing, you're picturing. So again, it gets back to this picture you've got. You've kind of transitioned to, instead of a repetition of some motif or form or a pattern, creating a pattern, you're actually trying to think of a picture in a geometric way.
Yeah.
But what you're trying to do now is convey, or not convey, but have that viewer ask why. And so then when you see it in these sort of similarities, in these pairings, it's not random, it's specific.
Yeah.
But it's so purposefully painterly and textured, it sort of begs the why. And so even if they don't get it, although they should if they look at the title, it pushes people in that direction. But what's amazing is how you are taking place now, but still keeping it very abstracted, but bringing in, and I'm bringing this up and dwelling on it because it gets to the next thing we're going to talk about, which is the ceramics, but if you're really trying to master in this show here, because the entire show, we're not showing everything. There's, I think, was there 25 or 30 pieces?
27.
27 artworks total that was produced this year, ultimately to do this. And you and I just curated, the 17, I think, that are out.
Yeah, like 16.
And
17.
so, including one sculpture. And, but what's interesting is how this whole show, not only just when we talked about how you were thinking about it in terms of binaries or polarities or, internal tensions or whatever, but you also have thought about it in terms of the 4 different media and this interplay between the media, all based on painting in a painting format, which is kind of amazing.
Yeah, and so when I create a piece, there's before I even get to painting, there's 4 different steps to get to that piece. So it's first, it's
never heard of a 4-step program. But
yeah, I mean, I think because I graduated with a printmaking degree.
Yeah,
and
sorry, wait, what?
A printmaking.
Oh,
degree.
printmaking. Okay.
And before then, I was studying to be an architect. And so, from the way my brain works is I have to work in steps. And so, I drew a thumbnail, and from that thumbnail, I drew an outline diagram and kind of numbered each section of the painting. And if you're in my studio, you can see a cheat sheet. There's a huge cheat sheet that tells you, if number 7 is going to be airbrush, number 8 oil stick, 14 is light color on dark background. So it's like there's steps to each section, and it's kind of like a paint by number. And then when that gets finished, I paint that onto ceramics, and the movement of how the glaze works kind of influences how the movement in the painting is going to work.
So, okay, now that's an interesting point. I didn't know. So what you're saying is even this painting here, there is a ceramic study of it?
Yeah.
How big?
It's like,
small.
Probably size of this. So this is a study.
Okay.
4 by 5? 4 by
Okay.
5? Yeah.
Interesting. So even a painting like this, now in your process, you're creating well, I guess a ceramic study first, a flat ceramic study.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Because it's like the same idea as printmaking. You spend so much time carving a block of wood, and that itself should be considered as an art form, but that you need to add ink and you need to run it through the press. And so, I don't know, it's just my way of working where it's like, how many ways could I have this dance with the medium, and how many ways could I have this collaborative companionship with art itself. The process is a process.
But this is just the ceramic edition. This has only been like in the last 2 years, right?
Yeah, correct.
Okay, so before that,
it was a simple, pastel on paper, or you have your studies.
okay, so you've always had a sketchbook aspect to your work. Gotcha. Okay, that you sent me sketchbooks, and I've seen those, but I didn't realize. So that's interesting now. Okay, well that makes the whole ceramic thing even sort of more interesting, I think, because that's the other piece that's next to you, which does not look like a typical ceramic piece. And if you want, we could even take the one off the wall and you could hold it and just show people. But neither one of these are typical ceramic pieces. But that's why I wanted to show people. A lot of them are mostly like shields. They're flat and they're shield-like shape. This one's a little different. And of course, I was just immediately drawn to it because it's different. And but this is ceramic.
Yes.
And it's mounted to, is it wood? Or,
mounted
wood.
onto plywood.
And then you have this foam, or not foam, but you got this
flock
around the edge, which is pretty cool. So this is mixed media. But I love this because again, it's hard edge, geometric looking, and it's even optical, very optical. And you do like optics as well, I've noticed.
Yeah.
And so even in your earlier works on paper and things like that, you do like sort of playing with that sort of illusory effect. And but not in a typical sort of op art way, but you seem to really like engaging with that visual activity.
Yeah.
But this is a really cool little piece. So it's an interesting shape. It kind of looks like a G or an 8 so how did you come up with that? Just out of curiosity. We didn't talk about that last night, so.
Yeah, so I did go to Florence a couple of years ago, and so I did manage to get the columns, arch forms of the cathedrals, and so
yes.
That, and there's a cathedral called Siena Cathedral, and they have a lot of striped marble, and so I do have several books on like histories of why are stripes so enticing, and so it's like I'm trying to figure out why do our eyes gravitate towards something that's striped or polka dot or pattern like, and yeah, this is a very shaped canvas ceramic looking thing. And that was like, usually when I'm working on ceramic, it's, a flat, maybe rounded edges, never really rectangle.
Yeah, they have sort of this softer edge. You don't usually do a hard square.
And that's my choice, because like I can obviously just make a perfect square, but I think with ceramic,
they almost look like a flatbread pizza.
Yeah, they do, and they have that. The texture does have that, and so, yeah. And this piece was, I've never really mounted a ceramic piece onto wood, and so this is completely new for me. And this might be gravitating towards a new direction, but yeah, I'm really excited about this piece, and it came out better than I expected.
Well, and curatorially, I picked this because I wanted to have something to break up these two larger paintings, and I wanted something that was different because they both are sort of busy in and of themselves, and I wanted something, of course, that's busy too, but it's a hugely different scale.
Yeah.
And it just reads totally differently, but also the curvilinear forms are echoed in both of these.
Yeah.
And so I just, curatorially, I thought that looked really good.
Yeah.
And because we were trying to pair a small work, with these larger works to create that dialogue, just like we did on that other wall, where it shows your sort of experimentation with, a format and a medium you're more comfortable with, even though you're transforming this now. You're doing something different. It's not a typical geometric painting any longer. It's not your mama's geometric painting.
No, yeah, I mean, I've always looked up to like Blanque Palermo and, you know, the Albers and all these icons that, you know, I just read and read and read about. And so my approach is, okay, how do I make it my own? How do I make these sort of process of painting my own rather than someone else or, you know, copying another artist? It's just, how do I give it my own character, my own stylistics, and everything I've learned goes on to them. So
yeah.
Yeah.
I think what we're going to do is, before we go to this painting, while we're still talking about the ceramics, I do want to talk then, so about this other one here. And I don't know if you can kind of zoom in on it, but would you mind explaining? So this painting here is, it's a canvas, and there are actually, on each corner is a flat ceramic piece. So this is a great example of what you were just talking about, which was, as part of your process, you want to make your paintings do a study of your paintings with ceramics to see how the colors, because we're going to transition to that part of this discussion now, because that's a big departure for you to have the color sort of spilling out of the lines a bit. And so, because this is a really unique piece, so go ahead and explain now sort of that whole dynamic of the color and the forms.
So the name of this piece is called Constituting the Core. And so in essence, this is constituting what the core of the show is going to be in this, you know, transition onto ceramics. And so I was using these tiles as testers for colors and techniques and, you know, effects. And so inside of these ceramic pieces are different approaches to painting. So you have your gouache on gouache, watercolor, you have oil, and then you have flocking, and so this was more of this key component in how the other works are gonna go.
So this almost became a color sampler for everything
Pretty
else.
much like a test tile.
And the reason why I put this one next to these, which are totally different sort of colors, with the magenta, the pink, the purple, was because of this sort of minty green, this softer green, these sort of not typical blues that were almost sort of grayed or neutralized, because a lot of the colors over here were like, you know, puce and like a gray lavender and a teal, and so they were like tertiary colors or neutralized colors. You know, so that's why I thought this was a great pairing. But it also pairs amazingly, and now that you just described it, it's not a surprise, with this other painting. So we'll sort of pan back, and so this other large painting, as you see, has this red, orange. The yellow is here, and that little bit of lavender. So those are in that sort of sampler. But this is a much more of a hard-edged sort of geometric painting. And I can't remember the title of this one. I need to go get my cheat sheet.
It's called Wooden Roof.
Oh, that's right.
So,
this was the roof.
So this is my view, because in El Salvador there are a lot of people, they construct their homes, and so my aunt and my uncle constructed their home, and so a lot of times the ceilings are exposed, and so this is my view from the floor looking up, and I try to include different variant types of sand in this work, just because it's paying homage to like the natural world and the reality of like where I grew up. And so the way the sand and the glass beads and the paint work, it turned this painting into a more vibrant piece because how the light reflects back.
Right.
And so, yeah, it's,
Yeah, the palette's beautiful. I think it's really great, and I love this sort of unexpected sort of aqua color down here.
and I made it a point for like the pieces to have a textural flat, textural flat. So they kind of
Gotcha.
like, it's still a duality where it's, they trade positions and off the time.
This one, even though, pardon me, there's a lot of the glass beads and the, more gritty surfaces and these very painterly. This one has, when you step back and look at it, is a very hard edge, very pristine looking piece. Which is interesting, and that's what I like about in this series. The engagement when you get up closer to them always sort of ventures away from that.
Yeah.
And then there's just sort of a story and a narrative behind each one of them. And but I love the way that pairs up with this hybrid piece, and I consider that sort of a hybrid piece too.
Yeah.
And so they're not pure ceramics, and but yet you're bringing these together. And part of what you had explained to me, what's fascinating you is in the ceramic process. There's you make your form and you do the first firing, and then you get precise and use a ruler and pencil and you mark all these things out very precisely, just like you can see on the canvas on that. But then when and this I'm trying to relate now back to the comment you made about your process in this painting. So when you then go in and do the glazes, and for people who don't do ceramics, it's not like regular paint. It is different.
Yeah.
And even though you paint it on there precisely and you're perfectly within the edges, it's that process in the kiln, that whole physiochemical process that's happening there between the heat and the chemistry of the elements in the, where the pigments and the mica or whatever else is in there becomes sort of liquefied and totally transformed into this new material. It spills over onto the edges. I mean, out of the edges sometimes.
Yeah.
And so becomes less uniform. Even though it went on precisely, it's not when it comes out of the kiln. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Not to sound like Rachel Maddow. Did I
No,
get anything
I
bad
mean,
wrong about that?
That is correct, and it's something I choose to do because it's not just me creating this piece. It's me and the kiln. We have this, love and hate relationship where, like, one of the first rules of ceramic is never get attached. Because things can crack, break, it can warp. And so a lot of times I love this sort of surprise what I get when I open the kiln, and even though I paint it in a very hard edge, perfectly, mathematically accurate way, it tends to do its own thing. It's like nature taking its course. And obviously I could do a perfect, accurate painting by doing underglaze, but I choose not to, and it's because I love the sort of spontaneity when it comes to.
But this is a big departure for you because your history has been sort of this rigor of geometry. Yeah. So this is really forcing you out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
And so now back to this painting then. So when you did the model, or when you did the study on ceramic and you fired it and it came out, I'm assuming these, what did it instruct you here? So I'm assuming the glaze kind of went out of the lines and what have you.
Yeah.
Did it change any, or is there anything specifically about that performance in the kiln that you translated to this painting?
I think the effects, the effects of the glazes, some of the glazes were crystallized a bit more than the other satin ones or speckled ones, and so a lot of the marbleizing and the crackle are effects from the glaze.
Okay.
And so that's why you have.
So I'm curious now.
Yeah.
This edge effect of the blue,
Yeah.
and I'm not touching the painting, people.
Yeah.
but the edge effect of this inner light blue, was that a glaze effect?
That's a burn mark. So it's like, if you look at the glazes up close, you would see a slight darker edge.
Yes.
And it's because of the accumulation of the paint, the glazes sit closer to the edge than
So it's
the
almost
middle.
a saturation desaturation effect.
Correct.
Yeah. It's a concentration of pigment.
Yeah.
So you did paint this then. So this is a direct response to that. Okay, well that's fascinating. Okay.
Yeah.
So now I'm glad we're sort of breaking this down a bit, because you commented that those softer edges, what have you, have been instructive and elucidating. And it just dawned on me when you specifically brought it up in this painting as your process. That's why I was kind of curious, was there something that translated over? And it has.
It has, yeah.
So, okay, that is really interesting. So I think it's like I told you a couple days ago whenever we were talking about it, as you were describing all of this, and it kind of reminds me of these food channels, where these chefs come and there's this competition, and then the judges will go, you didn't really transform it. You just chopped it up and put it in there as salad. That's not really transforming it. And then the people who always win are the ones who it's either the baking process or what they combined it with, or the juxtaposition of the flavorings or whatever, a little bit of the acid here or there. And it's sort of interesting how, the chefs that win are the ones that seems like you did something different to it. You turned it into something different, and it almost, this is what these discussions with you over this past year was not what I was expecting, but I think it's quite wonderful, because it sort of feels like that's what you're trying to do. You're taking painting that you're very passionate about and geometry that you're very passionate about, and your training of sort of, given your architectural background and what have you, that's all being there's a lot of precision in that. You can't mess up on that stuff. A quarter of an inch matters. And so, but what's interesting is how you are using the ceramics to inform your painting, but at the same time, your knowledge of color, paint, and structure is sort of informing how you do your ceramics.
Yeah.
And so that's coming through, and so you're melding these two and almost making the medium less relevant relative to the dialogue that you're trying to have. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it's you've explained it the way how I think, and it's
I'm going to get Rachel mad outside.
but no, yeah, it's like, a tug and pull. It's like going back to resources, going back to the mediums, and relying on both parties, as me and the work, working as one to create this one thing. And it's even though some things are prematurely planned out, along the way the process fluctuates, and I will as an artist and as a creator, I have to adapt to those sort of results. And so,
but it almost seems like, too, just hearing you talk today, you've been just talking about it a lot more, because you're just more relaxed and it's up and the show's kind of running and it's kind of sort of thing. So now you're kind of reflecting back a lot, which is good. But it's instructive, I think, for collectors, curators, writers like me and stuff to hear this, because what it almost is sounding like to me is not only, it's not like the big epiphany here is the painting and ceramics and this interplay between the paint, if you will, the glazes or the oil medium, and how that's working and what have you, and how you're trying to interchange them. But it almost seems like what's happening is, because you've brought up a lot of times too, and I'm remembering back to something that you'd written to me earlier this year, of how you've been sort of having this, reflecting back on your, sort of your upbringing and the cultural aspects. And it seems like you're reflecting back more on when you were in El Salvador, and you seem to be bringing the nature element more forward. Yeah. So it's almost like your hard edge is hard edge, but you are not soft edging it, but you're softening it inside, and it's almost like what you're doing is what's transforming. The transformative thing has been sort of you're wanting to have a stronger connection with nature and that sort of serendipity or just the more organic element of nature that we think about, even though nature is incredibly precise and rigid and you know, full of its own set of binaries and everything and symmetries. But is that sort of what you think is happening? Is that you're just sort of, but you're still doing it in a structured way because you're just sort of wired that way. It's like you said, you like baking because of the precision in baking. Yeah. That's why I don't like baking. But, you know, I mean, I use recipes as sort of, you know, they're instructional. I mean, or they just kind of give you an idea. You know, you just got to run with it on your own. But it almost seems like maybe, do you think there's more happening in terms of your sort of embracing sort of a, you know, sort of culture heritage? And the whole, you seem to be identifying more and more with the whole natural world element when you're looking back at that. Do you think that's having a bigger effect?
And it is, because I think in the past year, you know, with the pandemic, I had to make sure my family is okay, and so I never really had a great bond with my mother, and so since this year, I'm finding out new things, whereas she used to make ceramics when I wasn't aware she even thought of art as this sort of form of expression. Oh. And so my fascination with ceramics increased even more when I found out that she used to make it as a child. And I've recently just started growing a huge collection of plants and rare plants in Kansas City. And that's another fascination that my mom really got me into, is taking care of these sort of like plants and this whole like scientific approach to like botany. And so all these sort of things that I call my mom every Sunday. So every time we're in communication we're exchanging knowledge, or, you know, I'm finding out, you know, certain things where it's always been in me to have an interest in, and the sort of like.
Is she still in El Salvador?
She's in LA.
Oh, in Los Angeles. Okay.
Yeah, and so, and you know, so it's more intimate for me now, and it's and you know, living in the Midwest, you have open skies, you have prairie fields, and these sort of you're more encompassed by nature than the city. So
you're going to have a minivan the next time I talk
to
you.
I am looking into purchasing a minivan. Yeah, and that way I can ship works back and forth easier. Yeah.
Well, there is a functionality to it.
Yeah.
So, well, this was interesting. Is there anything else? I mean, this has been a good corner. I'm really glad we parked here, because this discussion's really now, and I had no idea when we put these together, that how much more we elucidated about your process. And so, but you also brought up another word, and that's why I want to move to the other side, because I want to follow up on this whole notion of intimacy. You really seem to enjoy smaller works, and that's why I want to get over to the other side. We'll talk about that, and we'll finish talking a bit more about your process.
Yeah, sounds great.
Oh, and Yao told me to remind you, you have to subscribe on YouTube to our videos. So I'm just adding that correction.